Good day, and thank you, everyone, for joining us. This is Paul Rocchio at the International Franchise Association. Today's presentation is part of IFA's 2021 Economic Outlook webinar series based around the newly released 2021 Economic Outlook on Franchising report. And we've saved the best for last. Today, we're going to focus on table full-service restaurant sector. Two quick notes before we get started. We are recording today's. We'll make it available on IFA's microsite later this evening, community.franchise.org. And if you have any questions for the panelists, please use the question box and we'll address the questions towards the end of today's webinar. And yes, that is my pre-pandemic look, but I guess we'll have to get that slide updated at some point. So today's purpose is to give you an overview of the report findings for the table full-service restaurant sector, and then you're going to hear from some of your awesome peers within this sector on where they see the franchising economy going. So for a high-level overview of the full report, you can view our past and initial recording of our May 18th series kickoff webinar at community.franchise.org. But here are a few of the key points to note in Frandata's findings. Frandata predicts that by year end, franchising will have recovered to nearly 2019 levels in most metrics: business growth, employment, economic outlook, and contribution to GDP. Franchising is expected to experience the highest upswing of franchise sales since the last recession this year, and that's huge. And then specifically for the table full service restaurant sector, while this past year has of course been very difficult for our friends in this sector, it is predicted that table full service restaurants presence will grow by 6.2% in 2021 to a little over 30,000 establishments. And franchise employment in this sector is also projected to increase to a total of more than 1 million employees, adding about 88,000 jobs this year, a growth rate of 9.5%. And then finally, in this sector, specifically is expected to increase their economic output by almost 32% over 2020 numbers to a total of $66.3 billion. So these are all great predictions and a lot to work towards. So on that note, I'd like to introduce the table full service professionals who have kindly joined us today to talk a little bit more about their perspectives on the franchise economy as a whole and within this specific sector. So first off, we'll start with ladies first. My good friend Shaq Turner, Senior Director of Franchise Development for Melting Pot Restaurants. And Shaq, thank you for joining us today. Followed by John Payton, CEO of Dine Brands Global. And John, thank you so much. And then we have David Conklin, Senior Vice President of Development at Golden Corral Buffet and Grill. And then, of course, my good friend Sam Ballas, President of East Coast Wings and Grill. So thank you all. And on that note, I'd like to turn things over to you, Sam. Sam, please take it away.
Thank you, Paul. We appreciate all the work IFA has done for the franchising and is doing for the franchising. I know you guys are working hard and staff in DC as our franchisors and franchisees across the country in this crazy pandemic mode. So the topic today is full service and economic type of stuff. So let me throw a couple things out there before I kind of toss it over to the panel to get into some conversation. We've got probably three kind of macros that we've been dealing with in the food space for the majority of last year and early this year. So you've got COVID, you're dealing with, we've got legislative issues we're dealing with, both as operators and as franchise models, and of course the economy and all those unknowns, right? So in COVID, who would have thought a year ago when COVID was hitting, we're on-ramping this problem that, 12, 13 months later, we would have supply chain problems in the food space. Those exist, right? Staffing issues, when are these employees going to come back? On top of that, all the COVID operational changes that all the brands have made trying to survive this process. And now you've got all this economic data across the globe coming in that's making the stock markets shake around with, the Asian respiking and South America respiking. What does that mean for the U.S. in the future? legislative issues that we've been dealing with for the last few years that have now amplified with the new administration. The PRO Act, the AB5, the AB 257. Then you've got the Senator Cortez Masto's out of Nevada report that basically, in a nutshell, that 80-some page report says that franchising needs to be recalibrated and calls reforming more rules and laws and regulation for franchising to fix all the bads and necessary franchisee protection processing. So we've got that out there. And of course, the economy. Where's the economy heading? What does that mean to full service and casual dine table service? Will vaccine continuations of vaccinations help? Will it not help? Are we going to evaluate in the new economy consumer habits, and are those ever changing? You know, how have brands worked with that process going forward? And personally, I think that COVID has homogenized our consumers, right? So millennials are acting like boomers, and boomers act like millennials. My father's 75 years old, and he got his first iPad a year ago during COVID, and now he's got Facebook at 75. What does that look like in the economy going forward? Is Q4 the magic quarter this year that we could technically say economically we're out of the pandemic? Technology increases for the economic challenges. GDP, of course, just got ratcheted from the December projected 4.2%. Now they're saying 6.5%, which means that the comeback is sizzling. Obviously, in the food space, we're feeling that with supply and demand. That we're having plenty of demand, and supply seems like it's disappearing places. We don't know where it's going, and how do we get it to our stores? And then you've got, you know, this thing that I think we need to think about in these conversations is that there's one positive last year with the pandemic is the people and households have saved almost $5 trillion. That's projected by the World Bank, and there's a lot of money there to be deployed back into the economy on top of what Washington is doing, which of course is amplifying some of the problem with our staffing issues and getting that process. So how is that money going to look in the economy forward in 2021 and 2022? And of course, the big elephant in the room is all of this new debt that we've put on, and how is it going to absorb that process? So that's kind of like an oversight. I was making a bunch of notes in the conference that I'm actually in Florida visiting this week, and I broke it down into, you know, there's COVID issues, we got legislative issues, and the economic issues that pairs up with employment, retention, and recruitment that is very, very difficult today. And I think sets a very broad umbrella for conversation. So with that, I'll come down to John on my screen and let you know, obviously, just take opportunity, and all of us just have an open discussion of how you and your brand are going to navigate, and where you think we're heading economically for the remainder of this year and into 2022.
Sure. Thanks, Sam. Thanks for moderating, Shaq and David. It's fun to be here with you together. I'm the CEO of Dime Brands. We're the parent company of IHOP and Applebee's. We've got, between the two brands, about 3,600 restaurants in the US and a couple hundred around the world. So that's the perspective. I'm also new to the industry. I just joined in January, Dime Brands, and I came from 4 years at Realogy, which is the parent company of Century 21, Coldwell Banker, another franchise system, and before that, 20 years in hospitality. So at Starwood Hotel. So I'm super glad to be back in hospitality, and I think I'll probably also learn on this call since I'm the newbie among the group. You know, here's how we're looking at it, and Sam, everything you said, I agree with, and it leads to a lot of optimism about 2021 and 2022, including the fact that you're at a conference, I think, right, in Florida in person. And I'm actually surprised to hear it, because many brands, you know, that do their national conferences are still waiting until fall or early next year to do that. So I think it's encouraging that the conference is going on. You know, when we triangulate all of the different data points, right? Some of them are economic data, some of them are human psychographic data and just research. We believe we're entering a restaurant renaissance, and that we're all going to benefit from that. You know, the human part of it is that restaurants are a place, they're an essential part of society, right? They're where people gather and they celebrate and they enjoy their friends and family. place where they can hug again, you know, once they become vaccinated and go on out. And so people have been cooped up now for 13, 14 months. And the psychology of that is, I think, it's everyone, regardless of their politics, blue state, red state, people are just ready to go out and enjoy being together again. And restaurants and bars are where that's going to happen. You know, and as you mentioned, there's the consumer stimulus that we've gotten from the federal government. There's the infrastructure bill, which is still to come and likely to inject, you know, even more money into consumer spending. As you mentioned, consumer savings is at an all-time high as a result of the past year. The unemployment rate is low, and so the micro and macroeconomic factors are very encouraging. We're a public company, so I can only talk about what we've publicly disclosed through our last earnings call. But you know, in mid-February, we did share that both of our brands enjoyed week-over-week sales increases from the beginning of January through mid-February. And so, you know, we're seeing that return to business in our own business as well. And I'll offer one other point, Sam, for the group, which is, you know, Jamie Dimon, who's the CEO of JP Morgan and is pretty expert on the economy, just issued his annual report, and he had a 66-page letter to shareholders. And you know, one of the nuggets in there is that he thinks the boom that we're now entering could run easily through 2023. So as I look at all of that data and perspective, it leaves us very encouraged about consumers' intent to return to restaurants and bars, and we're seeing it now.
Shaq, what do you think about from a development perspective in this type of economy?
Well, from the development perspective, I mean, it's something that I think I was attending the Franchise Times virtual conference this week via some of their sessions online, and the multiples that QSR and fast casual are getting and the demand that's there is highly desirable right now, just because of their quick adaptability to service the guests with the, you know, restrictions that were put on restaurants during the pandemic. I think from a development perspective, that leaves us in the fast casual or fine dining segment as a great opportunity for somebody to come in and still invest in the opportunities we have, because I think all of the things that you guys have talked about is we are going to see a resurgence of people coming, wanting to gather, wanting to sit, wanting to create those memories, share those special occasions together, and do that not within their homes or not within, you know, a park or some other public setting where they're taking their food to and be waited on. And that's just going to drive, you know, the interest for development back in the full service and casual dining sector. I think with you know, I think there's going to be some good opportunities for development. I think based off of, you know, just listening to the Franchise Times conference, that while money will be coming slowly, I think, to the full service and casual dining sector, it will come and we will rebound. I think while QSR is and fast casual is kind of riding that wave right now, I think we'll be on the back end of that. But I think that's where we'll end up going. And I see bright things coming in the future. I see a lot of interest. I have been having a lot of internal conversations, you know, with candidates that have interest in franchising and are looking at those opportunities to get into something that is a good investment. You know, good investment, not overpaying for something at the multiples that some of the other sectors are going at. Not even just QSR, but home service sectors as well.
David?
Yeah, you know, we're just seeing a lot of opportunity out there from that standpoint. You know, we're seeing from our operator standpoint, we're seeing a lot of opportunity in the markets. A lot of our competitors have closed up, and where there were 3 to 4 restaurants in a market, you know, we're emerging as the only buffet in some cases. And from a development standpoint, we've seen a lot of activity really recently that's really kicked into gear. And it's around, for us, we had a number of stores that have closed, and we've got existing franchisees and new candidates that want to go back in and open these restaurants. And even more exciting, they're trying to go after our competitor locations that have closed up and trying to get in and trying to expand their portfolio. They really see this as a moment in time where they can expand quickly and expand their footprint.
That's awesome. So, in our brand, we're a much smaller brand than all three of you guys have got going on. But, we saw some trajectories of some normalization in sales because we're a wing concept and that carried last year. In Q3 of last year, we started seeing normalization. And we ended up down just a couple points in 2020. And in March, just passed this year in March, we had our strongest month in net sales as an entire brand cumulatively in the history of the brand. So it's kind of like, wow, where'd that come from? And of course, now you've got the outsourcing of foods and that kind of product. So in our brand, I'm going to kind of segue into the next question. In our brand, being that we have, are a smaller brand, it was a little easier as far as speed to kind of on-ramp COVID and the pandemic in March and April of last year. And of course, it's as easy in speed to off-ramp it. But I found that there's been a new wave of trust that has amplified to maybe a whole new definition with our franchisees and our relationship with franchisors. And with that trust, the embracing of them having no other choice with so much unknown in casual dining table service has allowed our small brand, it's regionalized in the Southeast, to kind of really make some very positive, optimistic headway, as well as with our development strategy. So with that said, kind of spend a few minutes each and talk about how the franchisees have reacted with what you're dealing with and going forward this year in a positive note in their growth strategies and in the business in general. Whoever wants to go first?
I'll go
Sure.
first.
Go ahead,
Jack.
Well, similar to you, Sam, our franchisees, we were able to, pivot quickly during the pandemic, and then also kind of pivot back where we needed to pull back and kind of push different levers through there. So, with the pandemic, we launched a new menu, and that was done with conjunction of our franchisees and outside consultants. And that really leveraged us to have the ability to have our franchisees be able to increase their per person average check average and keep on to sales or increase sales through the pandemic, even though guest counts were down and potential sales could have been down. So the other thing that we were able to implement that our franchisees just really got behind us on was a national marketing platform. And I know that sounds odd, but a lot of our franchisees, given the special occasion dining opportunity that we have, we're doing their own promotions or doing kind of their own things, with some of the key highlights of Valentine's Day or those key holidays being a national thing. We rolled out a cohesive marketing calendar that our franchisees got behind. And that really helps for us to be able to support them through dollars, through digital marketing and digital advertising, and really geo-targeting those things. So from the operational perspective, supporting them, from marketing perspective, supporting them. And then you talked about the supply chain. We had some issues there as well, and probably will still continue to have issues, and I'm working through some of those things. So really being there and communicating with our franchisees, communicating with our vendors on a daily basis when needed, and having that open line of communication. So having those things really drive the franchisee success during them being closed or having limited capacity. I think we still have a couple restaurants that are still closed out in the West Coast, but most of our system is back up and running. Most of them at some sort of full capacity or almost full capacity, but we still have some limited capacity. So really, I think that's where we were able to support our franchisees, and they embraced, I think, the constant communication that we had with them, and that we were all in this together moving forward. So with that, they've seen, like you have, we've seen some record double-digit increase in sales from 2019 to this year, because last year with all the closures and everything, it's hard to compare it to that of sales, and that's with some limited capacities. But then that goes back to the franchisees' engagement the operational menu redesign and the marketing support, and the franchisees re-engaging in their business as well. So
That's terrific. David?
Yeah, for us, during the beginning of COVID, our franchisees were pretty nervous, and even the media was eager to declare that the buffet wasn't coming back. But that was a year ago, and it really seems like a lifetime ago. But I speak to our franchisees every day, and I'll tell you, that's a lot more fun to do those calls now than they were a year ago. But they have had to pivot, and they have pivoted, and they're very excited about the future. They're seeing the sales come back, and they believe in a bright future. But probably the two biggest things that we've been doing is ramping up on that communication and really including them in our innovation. And from a communication standpoint, I can tell you, it sometimes feels like we're almost on a constant live stream. We probably should just go ahead and set up a camera in the office and keep it rolling, because we're pushing out multiple live and published communications every single week. And we've been doing live weekly roundtables on Wednesdays to present ideas and figure out solutions that franchisees are facing that week. They need answers now. They don't need answers in 3 weeks or 4 weeks. So we get on the line, work with them, and come up with solutions to problems that are out there. We do a lot of town hall meetings with the entire system. Those real-time updates on the business, on the industry, and the issues that we're facing. And we always end with that live Q&A. And we stay on the line until every single question has been answered live, whether that's 30 minutes, whether it's 2 hours. We stay on the line until that very last question has been answered. And on the innovation side, we've really had franchisees partner with us. And early on, what we did is we created an innovation task force made up of franchisees and our leadership team. And we really worked shoulder to shoulder to try to figure out, how we're going to move into the future. And it's really been a lot of fun. And I can tell you, we had a franchisee in the Bronx who didn't only do beer and wine, which by the way, wasn't part of our menu, but they also had frozen drinks. And it's that line of discussion that caused us to talk about frozen drinks, and they got most of the interest, but it led us to talk about other innovation. And we're now testing frozen Jack and Coke icy machines and other new innovative products. So it's been a lot of fun around the office from an innovation standpoint. And we had our first drive-through open up in Jacksonville, North Carolina by our franchisees there. And we're testing a virtual brand with our franchisees at 11 more locations. So we've done a lot of innovation testing with our franchisees, and that's really created a lot of positive momentum, a lot of positive engagement, a lot of excitement. And we don't just talk in terms of getting back to where we were in sales, but how we're going to make that leap forward. So we've got a lot of engagement with the system, really trying to make that happen.
Yeah, I think what Shaq and David are describing around the way we accelerated communications and the way we leveraging all of these tools to communicate with our franchisees is very true at IHOP and Applebee's as well. And if there is a silver lining in the past year, it's that I think franchisor and franchisees really accelerated the way in which we work together and trust one another, and learned how to, I guess the word is agile, and be resilient. And we've all, I think, accelerated, whether it's the adoption of technology, communication, or just being innovative, really so much faster. And rather than repeat what Shaq and David said, because we did the same thing, is it sounds like we all, our strategy at Dine was to sort of go both on offense and defense during the pandemic. And it sounds like that's what Melting Pot and Golden Corral did as well, which is at the same time, while we were working with our franchisees to simplify menus, scale back marketing, particularly early in the pandemic, helping them secure their PPP loans and things like that, we also knew that it would end at some point, and we would need to be ready to welcome back our guests with new and innovative menu items, technology experiences. And so, David, like you, we launched a virtual brand around Cosmic Wings that's now being serviced out of more than 1,000 Applebee's, new menu items for IHOP, all of which were developed during the darkest days of the pandemic in anticipation of having new and exciting offerings when we welcome our guests back. And I think the company's franchisors, franchisees that succeeded during the pandemic were those that played offense and defense versus just putting your head in the sand and worrying. You have to also plan for the reopening.
I 100% agree with you, John. In our, again, regionalized franchise model as a brand, we did the same as what all you three have described with our franchisees: weekly, daily calls, follow-up calls. We started very, very early. We were actually white papering our franchisees at the very, very beginning of March, about 17 days before our main state of North Carolina shut down, 70% of the brand for about a week before we reopened for takeout. But you're right, offense and defense. During the pandemic, we found ways to be creative in how we grew our revenue, while the sales were coming back as a unit level average across the brand. And we update our websites for the consumer base. We update our development sites for lead generation. So you're absolutely right. The brands that took on a reality of having to on-ramp this pandemic and then do that offense and defense during the pandemic's run, which is still kind of lingering, but then have a strategy to off-ramp that pandemic, I think came out much, much better than folks, as John, you described as sand in the head. So what's really frustrating for a lot of brands like our brands, I'm sure there's hundreds more out there just like us who did all the right things, or worked really hard to do the right things, of how much information flow and validation and proofing us out there as far as how franchisors supported their franchises and franchisees through this pandemic that was global. And it'd be really nice to see one day those reports come out to show, what a franchisees on-ramping, managed through and off-ramping of this pandemic look like versus non-franchised brands or non-franchised businesses. Then to know that we know, right? We're the ones helping spearhead this visionary process. To know how much work has gone into that with IFA's help and all the franchisors' help to help these mom and pop franchisees or multi-unit franchisees, sometimes husband and wives and families that own these locations, come through this pandemic to yet have so much legislative curveballing and errors and darts being thrown at the franchise model is beyond frustration. So with that said, let's pivot from that kind of frustration and let's share with the audience something you found that was kind of unique that you had to pivot in operational style in 2020, that maybe you're going to off-ramp that pivot, or is that becoming something new that you're going to stick operationally in your brand going forward for the near future or the immediate future? Anyone?
I think many of the learnings from the pandemic will continue versus go away. So I think that we've all learned how to make our restaurants more hygienic, cleaner, and safer. And I think that we expect that guests are going to continue to expect, the increased level of sanitation and hygiene in restaurants. And we've learned how to do that well. Another example, and you mentioned it, Sam, in your intro, around how consumer behavior has changed. I'll give you an example. So pre-pandemic, off-premise business for IHOP was less than 10%. Now it's running at a very healthy a third or more. And IHOP and Applebee's became part of the consideration set for to-go and delivery in a way that it wasn't before. And we think that's incremental business, a new consumer mindset that will remain. I think it's true of the other, restaurants in this space. So we accelerated our investment in all of the technology to support that. We had to redesign restaurants, as you all know, that were built 15, 20, 25 years ago and don't have the back of house space to support the to-go business. We had to help our franchisees think about that. We had some franchisees on their own build to-go windows and to-go doors that they didn't have before. And even things like the to-go packaging for pancakes. We reinvented that on the fly, right? And now they stay hotter, longer. They don't get the moisture. And so all of that innovation was driven by the pandemic, and it will survive the pandemic. And so, without trying to be too optimistic or too glasses half full, I think the lessons learned from the pandemic are going to help our industry going forward.
I agree. Jack?
So similar to John, Melting Pot, we're a fondue restaurant, so to go really didn't live in our space pre-pandemic. So being able to put together a to-go program that was quickly put together, and while we're not seeing the sales volumes that you are as far as percentage of sales, we do have it was a bridge for our locations that couldn't be open and have any inside dining or have any restaurant capacity, whether that was outdoor dining only or inside and outside. So they've been able to have at least some sort of revenue stream, be able to support, the franchise owners to some degree, and be able to help them maintain or keep some sort of staff on as well. So that has been something that, we'll continue to look at. We've looked at packaging. We've looked at how do we expand that? What are the other options for that? What other products do we bring in for that? And how can we, accommodate our customers and how they want to use us going forward, because I do think fundamentally they've changed. I think we'll always have some people that now like the idea of being able to use or pick up or have those things to go, and they don't necessarily want to come into the restaurant and experience that, but they want to be able to replicate that same type of experience at home or in another place. So we've seen, even when stores have reopened, that to-go may dip a little bit, but it's still staying somewhat consistent in those stores.
David?
Yeah, buffet, similar situation, being a buffet and our kind of in-dining experience, all you can eat, pay one price. I mean, we had to pivot pretty hard to survive and really to get into the off-premise more than we ever had before, and making those investments that you mentioned in technology and to really support that off-premise and curbside. But when we look at it, we want to make sure we don't stop short. Consumers are demanding more. Consumers are demanding more convenience, and the quality of the experience that we give them is going to matter. So, we're excited. We've got our new rewards app that's going to be rolling out this month. That's really going to integrate with our off-premise experience. Then to be more convenient, we're testing drive-throughs. We got them on a couple buildings. We're testing in-store retail with grab-and-go food. We're working on contract feeding programs, and we're even evaluating a smaller footprint model with the drive-through. So, and as well the virtual brand. Our brand is called Homeward. It's our line of inspired comfort food. It's really an evolution of the Golden Corral menu. And, we've got 11 locations, but we're continuing to roll with that. We're going to be at 14 additional locations here in the next couple of weeks. But I'll say the other thing for us, just internally, we had to make a pretty big mindset change on how we were going to operate our company. And when COVID hit, we had to furlough almost all of our employees. And to make a comeback, we really needed to have a transformation. I mean, we had to downsize, survive, we had to reinvent ourselves, and then reboot and get back growing again, all with a fraction of the team that we had before. And so the leadership team, we had to change. And we really adopted the mindset that we were going to be a 48-year-old startup company. And, we treated it as a brand new company. We need to be efficient and agile. Many of the sacred cows of how we did work went out the window. And it was this shift in mindset that really enabled us to challenge just about everything that we've done in the past and how we've done it. And I know last week, and I'm sure you guys are all doing similar things, but Coca-Cola did a virtual beverage sampling with our team. And I'm not talking about just popping open a can of soda and trying it. They sent kits to our home that were more like a chemistry set where we had to mix the ingredients and try them on a Zoom call. But that was a lot less expensive. It was a lot less time consuming than flying in our franchisees, our operators, and our other team members. And it gave our franchisees a great level of engagement as well. And it really worked fantastic. And a year ago, we would have thought about doing it that way. So with smaller teams, flatter organizations, working remote, we're just having to challenge every aspect of what we do and how we do it, but still support our franchisees and get the job done.
I agree with you on your comment with from the C-suites and the corporate office, all that mental change that had to happen to drive that. In our company, we had some technology protocols and platforms in place, but we had to add a lot to expedite, because wings carried. We were lucky. We're a wing concept, so they carried early in the pandemic. But the reality is that you had to enhance platforms. You had to enhance your operation model in essence. Then we figured out as the thing progressed last summer, franchisee feedback was, wow, I could still do, almost the same amount of volume of sales and throughput with half the staff in the kitchen. Of course, now they wish they had more staff in the kitchen today, because that's been another scenario. But that did wake our eyes up to say, hey, we thought we had a damn good brand here as far as a model and how we drove a bit and EBITDA at the franchisee level for unit level economics, which is kind of the bread and butter of our brand. And then you go through a pandemic and you realize, wow, we could have done that better. We could have done this better. So there's been a lot of conversation I've had with C-suite across the country that there's been so much involvement and evolution in their own brands, and they thought they really had nailed this process, and they realized, wow, it could have been this. 3 years ago, I may have had 3 more 100 basis points, the bottom line, that now they're trying to figure out how to embed that in the future. So that has been kind of neat for everybody to take as much positive out of the pandemic as you can to enhance your brand for a better product and a better system.
It's probably true of all of us as well, is that we really accelerate our learning about the DSPs because it wasn't a primary source for the way in which we were communicating with our customers. And so what we had to learn about merchandising our product, making sure that we show up in the right way, making sure that we had talent on our marketing teams that knew how to interact with that platform on behalf of our franchisees was all work that was accelerated as well, because IHOP and Applebee's were primarily television advertisers, pre-pandemic, and that shifted as well. So that was a big focus of our learning and investment.
That's a great point. In our small company, we did some digital advertising and some social media type of scenario. And then when I went to the office the Friday before they shut down North Carolina, which is 70% of our brand, and told my team, stop all marketing, kill every contract you can kill. We're not going to pull from franchisees' national funds. Well, what are we going to do? We're going to figure out how to be the best Instagrammers in the business we can be. So a whole new learning curve that you look back now and you look at maybe 9 months worth of work and you realize, wow, we were able to penetrate in a platform we were kind of novice at for some crazy reason. We just put a lot of energy into it. So there's going to be a lot more positive, neat stories coming out the rest of this year. But to give some reality kind of check to that, is there anything that you foresee in your operations that would derail all this great positive stuff that we're talking about, we're going to push forward with and get our brands rejuvenated and back to growth modeling? Is there anything you think that you're concerned of or could derail this processes?
John, you're shaking your head.
But I say for us, I mean, we don't see a complete derailing of any of our expectations, but there's certainly a number of areas we're keeping our eye on. One of those would be the resurgence of COVID cases, and if the government ever reinstituted capacity restrictions, and especially if they didn't allow buffets. But if that did happen, we would be better positioned than we were before with multiple access points, all the innovation we've done, and everything that we've done since the first time around. We'd also work closely with local health departments and state associations to work through any of those regulations. But the other thing that's a limiting factor right now is labor scarcity. And I know that extends far beyond our industry, but it is a challenge. And we're continuing to be aggressive, to be a great place to work. We're going to be aggressive in our recruiting, and it's driving us to embrace technologies and look for ways to simplify our operations. So, and it goes across, it was mentioned earlier, into the supply chain, and we're trying to work through any disruptions that we've had. There's been a shortage of drivers to have deliveries delivered to your restaurant. So, we're having to work with our partners, our suppliers, our vendors to really make sure that, we're getting the support that we need as well. And it's really been based on a lot of long-term relationships that we've had with folks that we're able to kind of work through all these challenges.
Yeah, I would add to that. The only thing I would add to that list is the legislative angle, right? In terms of what may happen with minimum wage, what may happen with tip credits, what may happen with joint employer. So I would add that to the supplier issues, the staffing issues, the virus issues. On the what keeps us up at night list. That would be the list.
And I'd echo John. That's the biggest concern I think I hear from our franchisees too. Is what is minimum wage going to do to their profit margins, and can they afford to do business, and what does that look like, and how can we help? What things can we do to help them with that? So I think that's probably the biggest thing that seems to, on top of everything else, but that really I think is the thing that comes or floats up to the top over and over again right now in conversations.
I agree. The legislative process this year is going to be a really laser-like focus for the IFA. It already is. And it needs to be for all the companies that are in the franchising space. I mean, it seems like that, as I said, 12 minutes ago, with all the great things that we actually have done in the economy for franchising through the pandemic, supporting these franchisees, how we're still getting these darts and this, dark cloud over the model. It just amazes me from legislators who are public officials voted in by the public. And now you're seeing, I won't name companies, but now you're seeing a big monstrous billions of dollars companies with those double standards where pre-administration they were wanting to do pro this and pro that and help the employees and unionization of labor is not a bad thing, etc. And then when it happens to their companies, it's like a chase of how we can kill these votes and scenarios. And I won't name companies and those big great trucks, but the reality of the fact is that's some irony too with all the legislative unknowns that are happening right now. That's awesome. So we're right at the timeline we're supposed to be. Paul, if there's any specific questions that you have gotten, you want to go through with us at the panel, we pretty much covered all of our notes. And then if there's not much there, well, I'll ask the panelists for any closing offerings of nuggets to offer.
Yeah, and let me just say thank you all. Very insightful, excellent points. And I'll be honest. Right now, we don't have any questions. I guess you guys have kind of covered everything for everyone. But please take advantage of it, everybody who's participating today. If you have a question for all these thought leaders, please do jump out. One thing that I've been hearing from a lot of folks, especially in your space, is, and you guys may have covered this actually, is just kind of trying to ramp things back up, but also trying to get those employees to come back to work because everybody's making more money, collecting benefits, and we've been hearing that in a lot of different sectors within the franchise space. Is that an issue for your franchisees?
For our regional, super regional brand, yeah, it's an issue. We put out a model. There's some brands that put models out that we saw in the press on social media where they were offering up to $400 for back of the house employees just to be hired in day one. We've seen the get paid day to day, which we've not seen that in casual dining, full service dining in my tenure as CEO. But we did put some modeling out to show them that if you could manage through a throughput of X as a formula, you can afford to increase your expense ratios to sustain the piracy of your back of the house, front of the house employees, which has been happening in a lot of our markets where other brands are calling on them, or a friend's got a friend who's got a friend and ask them to leave this to go here. So there's been a lot of issues at the franchisee level because of the stimulus packaging that's out there that's keeping a lot of the hospitality employees out of the workforce. Now, again, I'm at a conference in Florida that's a hospitality conference, and all the brands that are here being represented. There's some franchise brands that are also here. Basically, everybody's thinking we're not going to see relief of that until after the September deadlines and all this stuff ends, as long as they don't extend anything. Our approach has been strategically just to pay to play. If you've got a $10, $11, $12 an hour back of the house person and they've been with you for a significant amount of time, they're probably worth $15 a day, so you don't lose them. There's a lot more in that strategy that we've developed, but that's been our approach. If you have an $8 an hour hostess or $9 an hour hostess in our Southeast markets, and they've been there for a while, maybe they're worth 10 today to keep them in line. So we've taken some hit on increasing our payrolls, and of course that was risky, because what happens when you get them there, you can't take them back down again, right? So there was a formula we put out that they had to look at and make a decision on, and said that, and most of franchisees embraced. Some of our franchisees didn't. Some franchisees opted to just stay with the daily fight and grind of keeping people employed so they can service. We didn't have to have any adverse operational processes with us so far, but I've had a lot of brands that I've communicated with daily that have had to put tables across the dining rooms and shut half the dining rooms down because of lack of ways to serve people. That's been an issue.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the franchisees have to make their own decisions about the wage that they pay, and the scarcity of labor right now. It's economics 101, right? Is going to drive up wage rates, and they make those decisions. But as a franchisor, I think we can help to generate interest and applicants. And so IHOP is doing a clever thing. It announced last week a national recruiting day. With the goal of hiring 10,500 front of house and back of house team members across the country in 1,600 IHOPs. And the National Recruiting Day is May 19th. And so at the brand level, we're supporting that on all the social channels and digital, targeting employees that used to work with us to encourage them to come back, et cetera. So we're doing our best as a franchisor to generate demand so that the franchisees can then seal the deal.
That's excellent. Any other comments? And actually, as a follow-up to that, with the staffing shortage, how are you using technology to supplement? I guess that would be more for obviously for your franchisees. Are they doing anything AI related, I guess, or are people using, for those who, I mean, obviously, I think for you, John, or you, Shaq, or more for you, David, actually, you guys traditionally don't do, grab and go. But I know, obviously, whether it's DoorDash or Uber Eats, and they, using the gig economy, if you will, we've been seeing a lot of that. I've been hearing about a lot of that, but of course, it's a little hard, like you said, Shaq. It's hard for you guys to do that, and also same, same with you, David, and John. I'll admit when I was still working at home, one morning my family was running out the door, and then they came back from IHOP, and I was like, "What do you mean you went to IHOP to get grab and go?" I'm not even thinking about going to IHOP for grab and go, but they all wanted pancakes, and they wanted waffles, they wanted IHOP. So there's one, right down the street, and they went. I was kind of surprised. They worked out really well. They've done it a few times.
I'm glad we're recording this, Paul, because it's going to be on Instagram and tomorrow.
I think from that perspective, Paul, we've definitely taken advantage of the third-party delivery services. We're not doing enough volume to warrant taking that in-house or looking at that in-house. And our franchisees have, while we have say worked on their behalf or to put together some sort of agreement with a specific service. Again, we're across the country, and not all those services service every area of the country. So we are there to support our franchisees and help them with that, and help implement their POS systems to work with those delivery services, or have those be a seamless transition into being fulfilled inside the restaurants and being delivered or being picked up to go, and having that be as convenient of a process as possible for the consumer or for those delivery drivers that are picking up those and taking them out to go.
Yeah, and we're certainly very similar. We're using third party. That certainly is an option for our guests. Probably focus on the curbside, to be honest with you, and really focusing on that program, making sure we get the word out, social media, making sure folks know what we have, setting up the restaurants to be able to service that. We're talking about changing in the front of our house. We've got a lot of space in queue line area, doing heated shelves and even looking into some of the food lockers to hold the food. We're taking a look from an innovation standpoint to see what else can we do to make that experience more convenient. Even in our prototype buildings, we're taking a look at creating separate entrances for to go, just to make it that much easier for folks to have access to it.
That's definitely something that shifted or pivoted this year too, was taking our existing design and saying, okay, now we need to have a dedicated pickup or to-go area where we hadn't, originally factored that in, moving forward. So that's another learning to take from this past year.
Excellent. Next question from Patrick. Thank you, Patrick. With seating being limited, hold on a second. With seating being limited on a case by case, state by state, sometimes municipality by municipality. What has been the biggest challenge with reestablishing SOPs for all franchisees when they are dealing with different local laws on a case by case basis?
Well, our approach has been, we've got some brand standards, and then we're very clear that you've got to conform with what local rules and regulations are in whatever your city municipality is. So, when it came to things like the laminated, when we could go to a laminated menu, paper menus have to be disposed of. When we could go back to the full menu, we've had sort of a brand point of view on the brand items like that. But when it comes to occupancy in the restaurant, the cleanliness standards, the 6 feet social distancing, whatever the local ordinance are, is we tell our franchisees that you've got to conform with what the local requirements are.
And we do the same, exactly what John just said. Adding QS codes to your tabletop so they can hit their phones and look at the PDF or the menu, however you're putting that in your phone. And that's what they're supposed to have done. That's what brands should be telling the franchisee to do. You've got your brand standards, wherever CDC's put out was primarily what the feds have been following. What they put out is primarily what the states have been following. States have had bigger surges, have added implementing of curfew times, where some states may not have done that. So you just follow the letter of the rules of the municipality if you want to dial it in that tight, or dial it in down to that level. And then try to adhere to your dining rooms as best you can to 6 feet social distancing, as John alluded to. And if it's going to be a QSR code that they can hit their phone with, look at a menu, or paper throwaway menu, or paper take with you menu. We had launched paper take with you menus and had messaging for bounce backs for more takeout ordering, right? If we're going to get rid of that and lose those few cents of paper printed menus, what can we do with it as a marketing piece to get more sales bouncing back to us?
It also circles back to what David and Shaq were saying in the beginning about communication, right? So we've set up mechanisms to allow them to call into our support centers so that we can answer their questions, as real time as possible about, what's permitted or not permitted, either at the brand level or their interpretation of local rules as well. So it's helped us get faster and at responding and making it easier for franchisees to ask us questions.
Excellent. Here is a FranDev question. What changes are you observing in current franchisee applicants now versus pre-pandemic?
For us, it's been the new pipeline in the last 5 months. There's been more desire in finding location before they want to talk to the brand in depth about discovery days and that such, right? They get their FDD to sign the receipts, and they read everything, and then they're off the race to see if there's any location that's a 2nd gen, 3rd gen that's cheap. And of course, the labor issue. That's been a big handicap for our brand, is franchisees that own other service brand franchises and who are thinking about buying a food franchise or asking, questioning us, and we're giving them very transparent data that it's not an easy task today with launching a store. Although we've launched a store in the pandemic, we launched one September of last year. It's doing really, really well, and it's having the same struggles as our 12-year veteran franchisees are having. But that's been the 2 biggest changes that I've seen, that they've been very fast to the real estate market to identify, and then very cautious and very in depth in the payroll expense model and the recruitment model and the management recruitment model, and the things that, of course, NLRB is saying we shouldn't be helping those folks manage, but you have to have something as a franchise model as a best practice. So they've been digging into that pretty deep for us.
Yeah, we've seen very similar. I mean, real estate seems to be a bigger driving force. Finding a site or seeing a location or a close competitor for us, that's really been driving a lot more of how they're moving forward. And you're right, they don't want to sign up until they know they've got their deal, or they struck a deal with a landlord. So, but we've also seen a lot of positive. We opened some stores during COVID as well. Actually opened 13 last year, and wow. We were surprised at some of them. We were pretty happy. We had a couple stores really set records for us as far as new store opening, traditional sales records. And we had Hialeah, Florida, and Puerto Rico just opened up and really did gangbusters for us. So, we had a lot to be excited about even during COVID, and really made us feel comfortable about the strength of the brand and folks that we were talking to, and them seeing that out there as an opportunity.
I think to add to that, the other thing that I've seen too is just the delayed or the cost of construction and build out and development itself. It seems like costs across the board, whether it's product or whether it's construction or construction employees, all of those things have been either at a shortage or they're months out in process. So looking at that, scrutinizing that more along with the real estate, as real estate is still tight. While there's availability of real estate in certain markets more so than others, is still that demand for real estate is still at a fairly high level, and we haven't seen a dip in those prices as in most places to the level that people would like to see or would assume that it would be, even given the pandemic.
Excellent. Well, on that note, it looks like we've gotten through all the questions, so we could yield back a couple of minutes. But if you guys want to just make some closing remarks, I did want to say, at the top of the hour, Sam, thank you for mentioning, Senator Cortez Mastro from Nevada, that 87-page report. And, we do expect, Bill to follow. It's just amazing how over the years, when I started here at IFA, everything, right before I started here, everything was on the state side with the Iowa bill. And then when I started here, everything, the pendulum shifted to the federal side with the Coble-Conyers bill. And then everything was kind of shifting back to the state side for a number of years, obviously with joint employer. And now that we still have, AB 5 in California, but now with the PRO Act and now with this 87-page report, though it's, we can't sit back on our laurels. We've got to, obviously use the help of our members and you all to help educate legislators on the fact that, franchising is a very, very powerful economic tool, and not only provides jobs, but, employs people obviously back in their districts, and adds to the economy. It's really challenging, because people just don't understand the business format franchise model at the end of the day. And that's something that, as long as I've been here, because, people up on Capitol Hill, whether it's, here in DC or at the state side, people just don't understand franchising. So we need the help of all of you to, and your franchisees to continue to kind of, drill that message. So, on that note, just can't thank you all enough. But, Sam, if you wanted to, maybe make some closing remarks, or if anybody wants to say anything, and then we'll yield back, a minute or two to everybody. But just wanted to take this opportunity to thank you all for your ongoing support and leadership and membership and friendship as well. So, Sam, if you wanted to.
Yeah, thank the panel for their time. Obviously, we thank you guys for taking some time and giving us your foresights and your thoughts. I agree with Paul. I think the biggest elephant in the room right now is going to be legislative issues, more so than even supply chain. Heck, I had excess wings 2 weeks ago. I sold to U.S. Foods instead of buying them from U.S. Foods. So those can be figured out, with good intellectual capital. But the legislation process, I think, needs to be on top of everybody's radar as a franchise model. And I think the key for that are the franchisees. We need to figure out in our brands how to get our franchisees engaged with legislators in states we need them engaged in, because a legislator is going to listen to a franchisee's voice 10 times faster than a franchisor's voice, because most of them don't understand. If you've ever been on the Hill lobby, and I've done that with IFA, probably 8 out of the last 10 years, they really don't understand. I think the key, I know the key are franchisees. So I would challenge all the panelists on this call. We have a lot of employees that we represent. to get your franchisees engaged. We all get those IFA notices on how we can get engaged. And I just take those and copy and send them to all the franchisees and tell them just, email away, call away, text away. And that's going to be the biggest help that we can get out of the franchisors right now is to get the franchisees engaged. That'd be my parting comment.
Excellent. Well, listen, on that note, I can't thank you all enough. Shaq, John, David, and of course, Sam. Thank you all. And this is the last webinar in our 2021 Economic Outlook series. So you could also view all of them on our microsite, community.franchise.org. And on that note, for everybody who participated today, thank you for your time. And for all of you, can't thank you guys enough. So enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Stay well.
Thanks, Paul.
Take care.
Thank you, guys.